I'm definitely one of those people who say to buy visual novels when you can, especially if you like them. However, I can't deny that currently, some visual novel publishers' storefronts that exist have some issues, especially if they don't want to rely on Steam as their main storefront. In this video, I'm going to highlight some things I think the visual novel stores we have could improve on. I'm going to start with some general improvements across the board. The first one I want to bring up is a better way to announce patches. Right now, if there's a patch for a visual novel, if it's advertised, it's usually through a Discord channel or on Twitter. If you're one of those people who gets a visual novel but doesn't constantly follow a publisher's social media or Discord, then congratulations. Have fun with your potentially typo-ridden, or worse, a build with a big bug or two in it, or just not knowing there's an 18 plus content patch that you're missing out on. So far, the only exception I know of is Johren. They do send out an email if you bought the visual novel and it got a patch. However, there's two issues even with the way they do it. One, in the email, the title is in Japanese and not the English localized one a lot of the time. The email doesn't have immediate patch notes, so you don't even know what got changed. And there's no instructions that immediately tell you that you'd have to re-download the whole visual novel just to get the up-to-date version. Compare and contrast with Steam that actually has auto-patch downloads and public patch notes. People could hate on Steam or whatever, but this is one thing they do absolutely right. The next general improvement I want to bring up is mailing lists. While I kind of brought it up in the patches section, a mailing list would basically be a way for a publisher to advertise any of their new releases. Right now, in order to figure out if a visual novel got released, you either have to follow a publisher's social media or Discord, or I guess just F5 the store's front page every day or something. With a mailing list, in theory, you could get an email opt-in to let you know when a brand new visual novel is added to the store. I just think this would overall be a good way to advertise new visual novels. This could also be a good way to let users know about where to easily find 18 plus patches of visual novels that get on Steam. So far it looks like only the Sekai Project and Denpasoft stores have this newsletter option. Now it's time to go into more ideas for each specific visual novel publisher's store. Starting off with MangaGamer. The first issue I've had for a long time is how ridiculously old their UI is. This is a common design style you'd expect to see in websites in the mid-2000s, and basically every other publisher store has a much more modernized UI in some way. This extends to the page for your account when you want to see what download links you have available. All the download links are these bland white buttons with black text. Don't get me wrong, thankfully the functionality works, and one positive I'll give MangaGamer is that it's still one of the few stores that takes you directly to a download link right after buying, but they've really got to work on their looks. I know there have been plans for them to edit it for a while. The only other thing I can say about MangaGamer is it'd be nice if they were a bit more open that they accept PayPal. Specifically, I know at one point they used to allow users to directly send money to their personal PayPal account, and then MangaGamer would just add MangaGamer points to your account. If this is still an option, it would be nice if they were more open and put it somewhere on like the FAQ or on the front page or something. Next, I'll talk about JAST. Now I have to admit, JAST is actually one of the overall better stores at the moment, having probably the best UI of all the current sites, having a lot of regional pricing options, and they host visual novels from many third-party publishers. However, there are a few minor issues I have with their store. Firstly, right after you buy a visual novel, it takes you to the order page, but there's no obvious button or instructions that tell you that you actually have to go to the My Games page to find your download links. Other stores solve this issue by basically taking you to a download link immediately in some way. Another issue I have with JAST Store is a bit debatable. Most VN publishers make their 18 plus patches for Steam 100% free. The way JAST advertises their Steam patches is to slightly reduce the main cost of the Steam visual novel, but just make the patch the reduced cost, usually costing about $4 to $5. The only reasons I can think to do it this way is if JAST wants to see how many people actually care enough about Steam and 18 plus content, or to make sales for the visual novels on Steam itself seem cheaper. I've seen some complaints that say that putting the $4 to $5 tag gives the impression that JAST basically does paid 18 plus DLC when everyone else does it for free. Next, I'll do Sekai Project store. Show of hands, how many people actually knew Sekai Project had an all ages only store? Before late last year, I completely forgot, to be honest. In theory, it's a pretty good store with PayPal option, visual novel merch, and no DRM all ages versions of their releases. However, they clearly much prefer to advertise their visual novels on Steam, and a lot of their all-ages-only visual novels are on Steam, but not on Sekai Project's site for some reason. For example, Rewrite Plus and Hoshizora no Memoria are not on Sekai Project's store. Outside the merch and maybe lack of Steam DRM, I'm honestly struggling to think of a reason Sekai Project store even exists outside merch, where they just advertise Steam and Denpasoft almost all the time. Speaking of Denpasoft, I do think Denpasoft is an overall decent store. It has a decent UI, a decent search engine, and it's the main way to get DRM-free versions of Sekai Project Eroge and 18 Plus patches for Sekai Project published Steam releases. However, outside of that, it doesn't really stick out much compared to other stores. There's zero way to use PayPal, even as a workaround, as far as I know. Denpasoft does host some third-party publisher visual novels, but if I had to be honest, I can't think of a reason to go to Denpasoft over other stores for third-party publisher releases in particular, unless you're really devoted to supporting Sekai Project as much as possible. I pretty much only go on Denpasoft to get Sekai Project published eroge and maybe an 18+ patch if I decide to get a Steam version. I guess the email newsletter option is something it has over the competition. And this would be the section where I'd bring up Soul Press and Painting Press if they actually had stores still around. Next up, we have the Nekonyan store. So a few years ago, they actually had their payment processor forbid them from selling their non-DRM eroge. So now Nekonyan exclusively uses third-party stores and Steam to sell their visual novels. In a recent AMA, they did confirm that the store will be revamped sometime in the future. Thankfully for now, they still do have a store page up where you can buy soundtracks and stuff, and of course get the free 18+ patches for Steam releases. It would be nice if they found a way to advertise this merch though. This would be the perfect way to use email newsletters as mentioned earlier in this video. Johren. Oh boy, Johren, one of the more controversial visual novel publisher stores. Right now, the main way to use it in my opinion is for Shirobune published eroge that aren't able to make it on Steam, since it seems like Shirobune is averse to putting their visual novels on other publisher stores, but the other reason to use them is their kind of frequent coin sales, which do let you get visual novels for much cheaper without having to wait for an actual visual novel sale. If you double down and get coin sales and wait for a Johren visual novel sale, you could in theory get visual novels for super cheap compared to other stores. However, Johren as a store does have some issues that kind of counterbalance these pros. First off, I think the fact that there's a Johren.net versus a Johren.games is confusing. Second, even if you somehow find out that Johren.games is the one with visual novels on it, good luck figuring out where to even go to find visual novels in particular. You'd basically have to know beforehand that they count as premium games, since I guess non-premium games are those random gachas they also host. Next, their payment processor. I've seen many people, myself included, having issues using credit cards. It can kind of be RNG if your credit card decides to work, since they need that 3D secure or whatever, so if your card gets declined, good luck getting it to work. If you want to use PayPal, you have to figure out that you have to pay Johren points on a site called Offgamers. Outside a small icon on the Johren coin page, good luck figuring out that this is the site where PayPal is technically an option to buy visual novels on Johren. Next, the DRM, or Digital Rights Management. Johren is the only English store that enforces DRM on their visual novel releases, though I guess technically only for the Shirobune published ones. Basically, after you buy your visual novel and download it, you have to enter in a code the first time you open the visual novel and run it. However, the more potentially annoying issue is you can only download your visual novel 3 separate devices at a time. Once you use up your 3 codes, you're unable to download the visual novel to any other device unless you can find a way to revoke a code. While this doesn't personally hinder me, if you're someone who has multiple computers or has a computer break, there's a chance you'll be unable to legally read a visual novel from Johren again. I've heard mixed things about their support related to DRM too. This type of DRM just shows a lack of trust in actual paying customers when the pirates are the ones not paying Johren in general, which is just super weird to me. Finally, I mentioned this earlier, but Johren is basically the only site that actually emails the user where there's a patch, which is definitely a nice plus over other visual novel storefronts. I just wish there was a more convenient way to update the visual novel besides having to re-download the whole visual novel when they could implement some easier couple files way to do it. While I don't read visual novels too often in Japanese, I have bought a handful from DMM and have some things to say about it. DMM has a rather old and crude UI, kind of like MangaGamer. It's just generally way too busy. Similar to Johren, DMM uses DRM, where you have to enter a code the first time you run a visual novel on any device. Unlike Johren, where the DRM entering comes packaged in the visual novel, with DMM, you have to download a separate software to be able to do the DRM login check. What's worse is that there are a handful of visual novels that only work with DMM's DMM game player. After buying the visual novel from DMM, you have to download a separate client, and only through that can you download the visual novel and put it to your computer. But you can only run the visual novel through DMM game player. And there are times you still have to enter in a product code even after running the visual novel and the DRM code. Talk about a large pain in the ass. I get there's IP protection and potential piracy stopping, but to me, this once again shows a lack of trust in actual paying customers. All this effort ain't stopping pirates, that's for sure. Despite all my complaints, DMM is the place that has by far the highest amount of visual novels in Japanese digitally. There are other places that sell Japanese visual novels digitally, possibly DRM free, but DMM has that guaranteed availability at the cost of a bunch of extra steps. And there you have it, my current criticisms of some of the major non-Steam visual novel stores. Once again, I generally advocate to buy visual novels, especially the ones you like. However, visual novels are still niche, and I think one thing publishers can do if they don't want to rely on Steam is to find ways to make their own stores more appealing. Do you have any input on the critiques I have? What are some improvements you'd like to see in visual novel storefronts? Feel free to leave a comment below.